I'm Jenny Townsend with the Stroke It podcast. This podcast is for individuals that are kicking off their career, newly married, or experiencing that midlife crisis. Stroking it can enhance every relationship in your life. You're going to learn about love languages and great stroking tactics and tips, and we're going to provide a lot of resources. So let's get to stroking it. All right, Jenny Townsend here with the Stroke It podcast. Excited to have my friend Wendy here with me. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, will you tell our viewers a little bit about you so they know who they're going to be listening to today?
Okay, I'm Wendy Rossiter. My husband and I, we've been married for going on 34 years. We had the Harley-Davidson dealership here in Sarasota for 32 and a half of those years. We recently retired. I have 2 stepdaughters, 3 grandkids, and 3 great granddaughters. Just had our most recent a few days ago. So,
Oh, congratulations. Are
thank
they all
you.
here in Sarasota?
2 of them are, and the other one's in Dallas.
Okay, so they get all Harley gear at all the baby showers?
Sure. So there's some of that, but not anymore since we're retired. So
Yeah, awesome. How's retirement going?
it's going slowly.
Okay.
My husband hasn't quite figured out. I guess I haven't either. We haven't quite figured out what to do with ourselves. We have a couple of plans, but those haven't taken shape yet. So
Right.
eventually we'll get there.
Awesome. And you have an RV, so you'll be making some road trips in the
Yes,
future.
we
Okay.
love doing that. So.
Okay, awesome. I know my mom does the RV as
Yeah.
well. So you have to be ready to be in proximity, close proximity for a lot of time
Oh,
with
yeah.
that individual.
You're in
So
a tube. You're in a metal tube going down the road.
so we all may need some therapy after that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, so Wendy and I have known each other for several years, and Wendy posted something on Facebook a few years ago, which totally inspired me. And I was like, I need to have you on my podcast. And then COVID happened. So here we are 2 years later together. And today's episode, Wendy is going to inspire you, and she's going to save you some money. She talks about different books that she's listening to and how YouTube is a great resource. A lot of it comes into play when dealing with some wounds. So Wendy is going to share a little bit about that with us today. We were talking about when this journey began for you, and I think that you were mentioning something around the time of COVID. So what was it about COVID? Was it that you were home more and you just had more time to think and actually deal with things, or talking about that journey of how you got to where you are today?
Well, just before COVID hit, I was contacted by a girl I had gone to school with, high school, and she kind of called me out on some bad behavior I had in high school towards her. And at the time I was like, wow, did I really, So I went back in my head and started digging through my past and trying to figure out why I would have been so mean to her. And as it turned out, all this stuff started flooding in of things that other girls had done to me. And so, I was being bullied. And so I became a bully.
Oh, we all
And
know a mean girl.
yeah, and it was awful. And so I made a public apology to her. I made the video that I think you're speaking
Mhm.
of. And it made me want to dive deeper into the wounds of my past. I had heard that all my life, to heal your inner child, and we all have wounded children in us, and it was like blah, 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 whatever.
But it's true. We
It's
all
so true.
do.
We are all the
I
walking
was just
wounded.
speaking with another woman, and that was her whole entire focus of her entire coaching platform is all about going back to that inner child and understanding what we were taught, how we were
Mhm.
treated, and how that impacts our life today and the relationships that we have.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so when you were going back into this and you were thinking about this, what was the main thing that you came out of when you were like, "Oh, this is what I did so poorly or mean to her"? Or talk to me about what the women were doing to you or the girls were doing to you at that age.
Well, I think we all go through it because
Hmm.
it's everybody's growing and trying to figure out who we are,
Right.
and there's so much influence on us from other girls, and you're listening to the wrong stuff. You
Hmm.
really are, and they can shred you in a heartbeat and not think twice about it, because they themselves are struggling to feel good about themselves as well. So it's one big battle we're all in. Um, One of the books I read, I think one of the first ones, it's called the Hoffman process, and that takes you on a deep dive back to like the first 7 years of your life, that's what really shapes us. Our brains are in a different wave pattern. So we pick up everything. I hear people talking in front of their little tiny kids, and I,
Mhm.
I cringe because I think, oh my gosh, these kids are hearing this. And it's true. And then you remember it, and you are kind of set that, it develops your personality. It sets, like we have a self-limiting belief.
Mhm.
So if you've heard over and over that, like men are no good, or money is the root of all evil, these are the things that stick with you and you will struggle with the rest of your life.
Wow, and that's before 7 years of age.
Yeah,
And a lot of
it's
those years, you're not really talking or you're just
you
listening,
are a sponge.
sponge.
Yeah,
Wow, it's interesting that you're
crazy.
saying that. I'm thinking of people that I know today and family members and things like that, where a lot of their philosophy has been screwed up for so many years. And if you think 7 years old, you're in elementary school.
Hmm.
And that's maybe why we have so many issues with some of
Yeah.
the elementary school. I have a lot of our parents that compare their kids to other parents or other kids and things like that. So 7 years of age. What were you doing at 7 years of age? I mean, like, did you have a good personality? Did you feel loved? Like,
No.
were you in a good place?
Um, I'm gonna go with no, just
Okay,
because my mom was really, actually both of my parents, emotionally unavailable. There wasn't a whole lot of, like hugging and well, stroking.
right,
There really wasn't, and it was
right.
kind of, my mom had lost her brother a year and a half before I was born. He was murdered, so there was a lot going on there for both of them because my dad was his best friend. So they lost this person. All of a sudden, I pop in. I was not planned. So there's a third kid to kind of,
Take care of.
yes, and they needed taken care of, and they weren't getting it. So I didn't get it.
Right. So they were definitely emotionally unavailable for you and
Yes.
weren't able to care for you, love for you, cuddle you. Did they read you bedtime stories or was there
Occasionally
affection?
there, yeah. I mean, there was, but it was pretty limited.
Okay.
And I can think of a few times when my mom totally checked out when I really needed her
Mhm.
for something. Like I had an experience when I was 10. Two men in a car stopped in front of me, and one got out and started running towards me. They were going to kidnap me. That's the only thing I can think. So I ran home and I ran in the house and I'm like, "Mom, I was almost kidnapped." And she kind of was like, "Well, stay home." Like she didn't call the police. She didn't ask me what the car looked like, what anything. Like,
Just totally
so when
unavailable.
somebody doesn't show up for you, that way you kind of learn you're alone in the world,
Right,
So
right.
that's why you end up kind of pushing people away because I mean, it just, that's how it kind
Well,
of
you have to
works.
become independent, then you have to figure out other ways to get that love.
Yes.
So were there other things that you were doing to get love and attention from other people?
Oh, yeah. I needed attention.
Okay.
And since I was the youngest is usually the funniest. So I was a big clown,
Okay.
big goofball. And I guess I got the attention that way,
Got it that way.
you know.
Okay. And then when you think about like high school and this girl, was it in high school that this
Hmm.
girl? Okay. So talk to us about that because I feel like there, a lot of young individuals, like women in their 20s, may still be dealing with that mean girl or having that resentment. And I always was taught you never know where that person's going to end up. So let's talk about that and like I can't even believe this woman like reached out to you after all these
I
years.
know, right? And
Yeah.
it was a little scary, but at least it was in print. It wasn't like she called me and I was,
Right. You were able to receive the message.
Yes.
And at first when you got her message, were you wanting to just like go back to her like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Or were you in a space where you were mentally and, like, emotionally ready to receive that and figure out what you may have done or what
I'd say I was
actions.
ready.
Okay.
I was ready because, my first instinct was, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. And I remembered an incident that we had. It was kind of funny, but I probably shouldn't share it. She might laugh too. I don't know. But that was I humiliated her in the cafeteria, and it was
Mhm.
awful. And why would I have done something? I'm
Right.
not that person,
Right,
you
right,
know?
right. So
So
what is the why? Like, through your healing and through your journey, have you figured out why you did that?
I think we had an equal amount of jealousy going there
Okay.
because we've talked since that. and she said she was an underclassman. I guess I was a senior when this was happening,
Okay.
and she was a sophomore.
Okay.
And um, she said she looked at me as though I was the most beautiful thing in the school. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because you guys, you and your friends, they used to just sit there and stare at us, me and my friends, and to me, to us, all of us felt that, it was like, what are you girls doing? It just
Right.
didn't,
Because do you think that's because no one was telling you you're beautiful or you didn't believe you're beautiful in that stage? Where that's
both
maybe
of those
why
are
they.
very true.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, because you are absolutely beautiful. Like
The,
that's what even in fashion shows. Were you a model? I feel
I,
like
I'm modeling now for Darcy, and it's a whole lot of fun.
that's amazing.
Yeah, I have a blast.
You'll have to like send some autographs to all those to those mean girls as well. So,
Ah,
all right. So going back to the Hoffman process childhood book, give us a little bit more insight into that and how that could be helpful for viewers that are maybe dealing with some childhood trauma.
okay. Hang on to your hats, though, when you start reading it or listening to it. I listen to it. I retain things better when I hear it instead of reading it. It will take you on a deep dive. It will unlock stuff you haven't thought of in years, and it'll literally put you on the floor in tears. I mean, I spent days where I was laying on my yoga mat because I would listen to it while I was working out, and I was laying on my yoga mat, crying, thinking my heart was going to explode. It was so broken, and I just thought I was going to die. And I was like, somebody help me. And all of a sudden, the tears would stop, and I felt this incredible lightness, like this load was lifted off of me, and I was almost giddy. And I'd be walking through my house laughing and feeling like I was going to float off the earth. It was such a cleansing. It was amazing. But I had to go through several days of being flat out on the floor, you know.
Was it diving into specific things where it was making you like relive and think?
Yeah. Yes. You go back, and something that they're saying will trigger a memory, or you will be validated on how you felt your entire life, but nobody ever told you, nobody ever gave you that validation that
Right.
you were right,
And
and
that you matter or
mhm,
what you're saying is true. Yeah.
or that happened to you, you
Right.
know.
So by the end of that book, do you feel lighter? Do you feel happier? Do you feel
I
like you've worked through a lot of it?
I do, because the second part of that book is looking back on them. So by them, I'm saying like my parents,
Okay.
teachers, people who did stuff to you to make you feel less than.
Hmm.
You look back on them with compassion, and you understand that they went through stuff too. And like, from a very limited um, amount of information that my parents gave us, we heard stories of their childhoods. So it's just history repeating itself over and over, but you need the validation to like cleanse and
Right.
get rid of that stuff. And then it's gone.
Right. So when I hear you say this, when you're talking about you had compassion for these individuals, is there something that people could be doing or that we could be doing to stop this? Like where it's not getting
Oh,
passed
I
on from
wish.
generation to generation or the philosophy or the mindset of those individuals change?
I wish. If I could do it, I would love to be able to write a book geared towards young kids so that they can read these things and not have to go through it. But I think maybe that's not my place. Maybe we are meant to do this so that we grow and we learn, and then we discover our own true selves, and maybe
Right.
that's our purpose in life. I don't know,
Right.
you
Well, as
know.
you're saying these things, I work with a lot of children
Hmm.
and I have siblings. I have full siblings, half siblings, step siblings, and a lot of them are dealing with ADD, HD, or ADD and things like that. And for years, as long as I can remember, it was like a curse if you had that.
Hmm.
And when I look at some of my friends that are CEOs and huge individuals in the community that are making change and they're leading change, a lot of them are ADD or ADDHD. And so when I was doing this level up course a couple summers ago with kids, I had them all raise their hands and said, "How many of you have ADD or ADDHD or something?" And like
They all did.
they put their hands up. And there was some that did not put their hands up. And the ones that had their hands up, I said, Those are the future CEOs, the presidents of the organizations, and all of you are going to be working towards them. And just that mindset shift for those kids, the smiles on their face, they actually believed that they were good and they were quality and they were worth something, because so many times if you have that diagnosis, there's an excuse made for
Right.
you and you're being bullied at this point. And I have a lot of friends that are, oh, my kid's getting tested for this. Like, they're making excuses for the behavior. And I'm like, okay, but they're a child. Like, what about just putting them in a different environment and stop trying to make them to the mold? So that's just like one little thing that I was thinking about.
Mhm.
Like, as you're talking about this, like the coaches and the teachers and these individuals, they're lacking patience or understanding of where these kids should be placed or where we should be directing all that energy versus trying to confine them. So, anyways,
I think that's where another one of the books that I told you about comes in, and that's the nonviolent communication.
okay.
Um, it My parents were very reactive. You said the wrong thing, you got screamed down and made to feel like you're a puddle of poop,
Right.
without them understanding where you were coming from. This book kind of teaches you how to do that. And I think everybody should read
And
it.
what's the age for that? Is it for adults?
It's for
So they don't have a
adults,
child version.
not that I'm aware of.
Maybe you could write that
Maybe
book.
I could, because it's,
Give us some examples of the nonviolent communication.
just, everybody wants to be heard. And I think we all struggle to be heard. I know a lot of times in conversations with people, they'll just jump in with their story. Like, I'll say, "Oh, I saw an eagle the other day." "Oh my gosh, so did I." And they go on with their story, and then the conversation changes, and I never got to tell my story. So I never feel heard. So this speaks to really listen to somebody, be attentive, look them in the eye, listen to what they're saying.
Hmm.
We're all so busy with our phones and, got to be here, got to be there. The kids need to be, at soccer practice or whatever. Nobody's really listening.
Listening.
And as a little kid, I think it's super important to be heard, especially by your parents, who maybe many of the times is like, "I don't have time for you now," or, "Go away, you're bugging me."
Hmm.
And that you become silenced. And then you struggle. I've struggled my entire life trying to communicate clearly, because I feel like I have to get it out really quick, because somebody's going to stop me, and yeah.
Yes. So as you're saying all this, I'm nodding and I'm listening. And my whole thought process was like, oh my gosh, I was doing that. I'm going to buy this book for
You
myself,
should,
because
I think everybody should.
for the longest time, and that's where it was like, I guess it was all about me, which I wasn't realizing it was all about me, but I would be talking to people and I always wanted to share my story. And so many times I cut people off. So many times I wasn't listening. So actually in 2021, my word was listen. And I became a better listener. My staff, my husband will say, "Oh, it was great for that year, but you forgot to listen in 2022."
Oh my.
So, anyways, I'm still working on the listening, but you're right. So many times we do cut people off because we want to share a story, and there's so many people that didn't have a story. My husband didn't have a voice for a very long time in our marriage. I mean, it was just I was constantly talking, and
Mhm.
so now that has helped our marriage by having him have a voice and in other areas of my life. So I'm going to definitely get that book. And then you had mentioned something about the compassion. Um,
Yes, it's like listen with compassion towards them. They might be upset about something, and it's real easy for us to be like, "Well, that's ridiculous. Why would you be upset over whatever it is?" And kind of dismiss it. And actually, really, I mean, again, I'm speaking about listening to your children. Listen to them and why they're upset, and then maybe try and unpack what's upsetting them so that you can get through it and help them be heard, you
Correct.
know?
Yeah, sometimes they get in trouble for misbehaving, but you don't always understand why they're misbehaving. It's pulling those layers back so you have a better understanding and you have time to listen.
Mhm,
And I know a lot of times when I would want to express things, if people don't believe in what you're saying or they don't have time for you or they just think, oh, it's just nonsense, they're not going to listen.
mhm.
And I do that sometimes to some people. I'm like, oh, again? Again? Like, haven't we had this conversation a million times? I'm tired of listening to you. So, but I definitely think with the whole aspect of listening to the children, because I do feel I know a lot of kids that don't have a voice. Their parents actually are speaking on so many levels for them, where I'm asking them how they are, and they look at their parents to answer how they are. I'm like, a lot of them though are afraid to say anything because of the judgment from their parents, and that's
Mhm,
another thing too. Where my parents great parents, love my parents, but I grew up in a very cold environment, like really cold. Like work ethic was based on, or my value was based on how hard we worked,
Mhm.
and a lot of things that, there wasn't snuggling, there wasn't reading books. So my husband grew up in a completely different environment. So, which led to different problems when we were actually married. But my parents always believed in us and they always made it possible for us to achieve anything that we wanted to achieve.
Mhm.
And they allowed us to fail a lot. Like we failed a lot. Today, kids today, their parents are so scared of them failing that a lot of them aren't failing and they're not getting to kind of go through that journey where they can have those good conversations of failing or not being liked or being bullied and things like that.
Yeah, that's
So,
gonna make it rough later on when they're out in the real world and
right,
you don't
right.
always get the trophy and, for showing up.
Everybody gets a trophy these days. Didn't you know that?
I think that is the most ridiculous
Yeah,
thing.
and talking about the silencing, I wanna talk about that a little bit for adults because I feel like a lot of times we as adults don't wanna offend people or we don't wanna get in confrontation with our friends and we're silenced. And I won't even go into the political thing, but there's a lot of things where people are politically silenced right now where it's like you don't wanna lose your friendships over it. Do these books talk about that in detail, or do you have any advice to talk about, like, when you're saying, "I felt like I was silenced my whole life?" Like,
Hmm. I don't I don't remember either one of them, talking like the political stuff, but I can speak to the political stuff because I have lost friends over
yeah,
politics, which I think is ridiculous because I'm
yeah,
always like, "Hey, I'm open. Let me hear your thoughts on this." And all
yeah,
of a sudden they've disappeared from my life and
right.
it's like, "Really?
Yeah,
Over that?"
yeah.
I mean, it's 4 years. Get
Yeah,
over it and
right,
let's move on,
right, right.
So,
Yeah, I would say as a business owner, I feel really silenced right now just because I have people that work for me. I have clients. So I think there's a lot of bullying with the adults. And I wish that we could all just get along, but that's just not possible. So, anyways, okay. So, continuing talking about healing the wounds and all your advice that you have to share, getting the love you want, I think is really, really important. Can you talk a little bit about that?
sure. I mean, it goes again to, and I'm only part of the way through the book, but it's more on that healing the wounds. We are all the walking wounded, and we have deep ones. I mean, I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I don't know that you ever completely heal.
Mm-mm.
I think it's just a progress process, whatever, to get you unlocked,
Right.
because you're kind of like trapped. You are trapped. I have my brother, love my brother to death, but he won't heal from his stuff. So I see him repeating the same things
Right.
over and over, and it breaks my heart for him. And
Right.
I wish he would do some of this work. And I've tried to be like, hey, here, read this book,
Yeah.
because he loves to read and stuff. Like, read this book, and he's afraid it's going to hurt. And I said, yes, it's going to hurt, but then you heal and you feel so fantastic, and you can open up new avenues.
Right.
Meet somebody special.
Yeah.
There's a whole
It's
lot.
it's hard. A lot of people are afraid to take a step forward and to actually go back into it. I was just talking with Sandy and we were talking about my marriage and things like that. And there's some things I just don't want to go back and deal with because I
Right.
don't want to bring all those wounds and all those pains and all those things up or the triggers. When we talk about triggers, we can easily be triggered by things that send us down that. So how are you dealing with the triggers?
Well, you have to do the work in order to get past those things.
Okay.
So if you don't go back and do that and you just keep stuffing it down or hiding it in that closet, I have a
Y-
closet full of stuff, several of them. Um, you keep hiding that stuff, something will trigger you in the future.
right.
And it's going to be in any of your relationships, not just your marriage, but your friendships and all that kind of stuff. So I have learned that I have to do the work. I'm not just going to be getting a hall pass.
Yeah.
And I really have noticed things that would trigger me with my husband in the past don't now. Like I hear them and I'm like, you want to go back to that old way. And that's what the Getting the Love You Want talks about. Like our
Okay.
old brain is set on
Okay.
certain things and
Things.
then retraining that to always be positive
Right.
and take a breath when somebody says something to you instead of just "Rah," and exploding,
Right.
and I think I said this earlier. I found myself very irritated with my husband this morning. I got
Yeah.
very impatient with him. And after he left, I was like, that was so silly. What, so it's like I need to dig into what that was because it was something so silly. And
Right.
I'm just like, why would you get so
Yeah.
mad at him,
Right.
So,
So when you talked about the results, you're talking about like a lot of the positive things that are coming out of it. What are some really great things that have happened in your life and in your mindset because of all this work that you're doing?
um, I think the modeling
Yeah.
had like I feel like a much more confident person. I was so I don't want to say beat down because, you know, but I guess maybe that is the right word. Like I was just so under, like I never looked at myself and thought, "Oh, you can do this,"
Right.
and because there were people in my life that were like, "No, you can't."
Right.
Well, they didn't want me to, and so I bought into that, and now I'm with a group of new friends who are like, wow, this is great. Go girl. And we're very
Right.
supportive of each other. And when the pictures come out and they're posted, we're all, loving each other and,
Mhm.
heaping on praise, which is what
Everyone.
everybody needs.
Yeah, we definitely all need that. We
Hmm.
need to stroke our own ego. We need people to stroke our ego. We need people to believe in us and
Yes.
say positive things to us. We have so much negative chatter. And if we start just listening to that negative chatter, we have none of that positive reinforcement. We're going to be depressed. We're not going to want to live life and we're
Hmm.
not going to be happy, which is going to impact every other relationship in our life. So when you say you're doing all this work, talk to me about time. Because I'm thinking like the listeners, like, okay, I can read this book and I could do this. Like, how much time are you investing in this work on a daily basis? Or like, what's the commitment to go and read the book or to allow yourself to go cry in a closet for like 30 or 40 minutes?
I was
So,
gonna say that's exactly it. You pick your time, and like I said, I when I'm working out, I have my iPad up against the mirror, and I'm doing whatever I'm doing, but I'm watching that and listening to it and absorbing it.
okay.
And my workout's maybe a half an hour, and if I only have 15 minutes, it's when I'm in the shower that's playing in the background, or I'm doing my makeup that's playing.
Right.
And so I try to do because once you start one video you become hungry. You want to know as much as you can. I do.
Right.
I want this stuff out of here and I want to be able to help somebody else maybe. Um, yeah, so it's if you've only got 15 minutes to read what you can in 15 minutes.
Right.
Just get through it slowly.
Right. So, but how are you making that commitment? Because I know a lot of people are thinking, "Oh, I don't have 15 minutes," or do you think they have to mentally really be ready to work through it in order to like get to that point? Or
I,
like, do you have any advice that would encourage them to start working through
hmm,
these wounds?
I think because I had gotten into a place, I had gotten into a place. Rick and I we essentially became roommates. We were starting to bust apart. Something
Hmm.
had happened. He was in a wreck and it wrecked our lives. I mean, it really did. It tore us apart. And we became so far apart that I got to a point where I was like, I'm done.
Right.
I'm out of here. Can't
Hmm.
do this anymore. And he was so blind to it. He was like, I thought we were happy. What are you talking about? This is great. And I was like, we don't even touch each other. It's like
Hmm.
so I kind of instituted this thing in the morning. He's wonderful at stroking me. He makes me a cup of tea every morning, and he makes sure I am well supplied in tea.
Okay.
He'll go out of his way to find tea for me. Same thing with wine in the evening.
Okay. And
This is great.
martinis.
Yes, and martinis on Friday. And he makes me breakfast every Sunday and cleans the kitchen. I
Nice.
mean, there's other stuff he does, but
Hmm.
these are the little things that I love. So every morning we're in the kitchen together. I'm feeding the dogs or whatever. So I walk over to him and we hug. And that has kind of become more.
Right.
It's getting a little hotter, you know. But that, when you've got skin to skin, you're heart to heart, and you're looking at
Hmm.
each other's eyes, it really opens things up
Hmm.
and it gets you closer, you know, makes a
Right.
connection
Right.
where we had gotten to the point we weren't even looking at each other, and
Wow.
I was like, I am going to make this work or I'm not, but I have to give it one last try. And I can't
Right.
tell you that just hugging has fixed everything in our marriage. It's taken a lot more than that. But I
Right.
think for me, it's really been doing this work. And that's what kind of motivates me. I want more. I'm thirsty for the knowledge of how can I make this even better
Right.
because it's becoming so good that I want it
Right.
better.
And it sounds like it's emotionally, mentally, and physically beneficial for you and
Absolutely.
helping you and all that. And I know a lot of people that have hung on to things from their past have actually been dealing with a lot of diseases and a lot of other things like that because it's internal. When I
Yes.
was going through some stuff as well, a few years ago when my husband and I were going through a hard time, I ended up with shingles.
Oh
And then I ended
gosh.
up with a million other things, and like literally my body, I had surgery, my body wouldn't heal for over a year. And I went to like doctor after doctor, and I went to an acupuncturist, and she said it's in your mind. Like you got to take care of this emotional side of things. And
Yes.
once I started doing that and doing the work, my wounds were healing up. They closed up as well, and then it just put me on a really great journey. But
Fantastic.
you have to acknowledge it, and you have to put in the work, and you have to make that commitment that you do want to, work through it as well. So I want to segue into the marriage as well. Let's talk a little bit about like how your husband strokes you and like things that would encourage people to, have a good marriage or things that maybe you've learned. Like this podcast does cater to people that are newly married. I didn't read a book about how to have a perfect marriage.
I wish
Uh,
I had, because it was tough in the beginning.
yeah. So let's talk about, not that we need to share all of the laundry and everything, but let's talk about like how long have you been married?
It will be 34 years on New Year's Eve.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right. Happy
Thank
anniversary.
you.
So I'm 40 and I have some friends that are going through, I would say, midlife crises and maybe getting divorced and lots of other things. So I guess let's start like in the early years of marriage. If there's like advice that you could give someone that was newly married, what would that be?
You know what? Watch the YouTube videos and read books. I wish we had had that back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no support for me, even like from my closest friends and like my parents. They were all, you made your bed, now you lay in it, kind of thing.
Right.
And you just didn't. There were no nuggets of knowledge being passed down from my grandmother or even my mother, because their marriages weren't all that
Yeah, I was gonna
wonderful.
say we can't
So
really look back to the
yeah.
past.
So now I'd say if you're just starting out, my God, you have a plethora. There is just endless knowledge out there. I mean, you're gonna hear some crazy, stupid stuff too. But I think after a while, you're gonna realize it's crazy, stupid stuff. Don't do it.
Right.
And yeah, there's lots of good stuff. Lots of smart people who are really willing.
To share.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could come up with something right now, but I just,
Yeah, no, that's okay. So when you guys got married, did you guys live separately and then you bought a house together, or did you buy like what was your living situation when you guys first got married?
um, let's see. I had moved out of my parents' house into a house with 3 other girls.
Hmm.
Time of my life for a year and a half.
That sounds like so much
It
fun.
was
Can we
so
do
much
that
fun.
now?
I know, I'd love to. It was so great. Like, pajama party 24/7. It was
Right.
just great. We had a
Yeah.
great time. We all got along really well. And it was super
Yeah.
fun. And then the girl who owned the house was getting married. So I either had to move back in with my parents, which there was no way, or find a new place to live. And Rick and I were getting engaged, and I thought, well, I'm just going to, and my parents were not the type that you live together before you get
Of
married.
course.
But I
Yeah.
was like, well, then I got to move back in with you. So they were kind of like, okay, as long as you
Okay.
got that ring on your finger,
Okay.
so we lived
Right.
together for a year before
Okay,
we got
before you get
married.
married. Okay.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the trend these days as well. I mean, you might as well test drive it if you can because s- I mean, depending on when you're getting married. If you're getting married in your 20s and you're not really set in your ways and everyone's kind of changing everything, but when getting married in your 30s,
Yeah, that's gotta
that's a
be
little
an
different ball
adjustment.
game. Okay, and when you think about like the span of your marriage, are there things that maybe you could have changed or could have done better or that would be helpful for people to know, to where if they're married or going through some struggles, we can help them out? I mean, my goal is to help people like stay in love and stay married, which we know that some marriages do have to end, but if there's some advice that you could give someone that is maybe struggling in their marriage.
I think, like, don't give up so easily. It's so easy nowadays to be like, you know what, forget it. It's not working. I'm getting divorced and moving on. Because you know what's going to happen? You're going to marry the exact same person in a different body until you heal these wounds and read the books or, do the work. You are stuck. You are doomed to keep marrying the same person over the same wounds until you fix them. So if you ever truly felt love for this person, um, try to stick it out,
Yeah,
try to make it work, try to do it together.
right.
um look into stuff, look into how to do it. I've been to a couple of different marriage counselors, and I didn't like them because they were like really quick to go, oh, this ain't working, get out. And I thought, that's crazy. And the second one I went to, she was divorced twice, and all she wanted to do was talk about her ex-husbands. And I thought, you're not giving me any tools to make this work. So then I went on this dive. I went looking for this stuff because I thought, I don't want to be divorced. I am going to see this until, one of us says uncle, but
Right.
we're coming together now. And Rick's really been good about, like, if I need something or, I say, hey, this is not really working all that well, I try to explain it to him the best I can. I'm not that great at explaining stuff, as you can see. And he will step up and, we'll work together.
As a team.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important, the teamwork of it as well. And I think through marriage, it's like I this or you this, and then it's like dividing the chores, like who's going to handle this and who's going to handle that. And then if you involve money, that's just a whole nother issue. And then throw kids in the mix. So I can't imagine either. My children and I, or my husband and I, don't have children, and we both have our own income. So we're called dinks, double income, no kids.
Oh.
Which I used to hate, but now I love and I embrace it as well. Marriage, it can be hard. And I know a lot of people that just want to give up, and they don't always understand. And I think that you hit it like perfectly when you said you're going to marry the same person. I know so many people that are on their second and third marriage, and I asked them, do you wish you would have made the first marriage work? And they said, yes. I was too quick to give up, or they were just lost themselves. Like parents, they spend their whole entire lives, like, doing everything for their children, and they forget who they are. They don't have their separate lives. They don't have hobbies. They don't have all these things, so that when the kids do leave, or they don't have an outlet as well. So 34 years. Amazing.
Crazy.
That is amazing. Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. And I appreciate you sharing your story as well. I know that you're going to inspire people today. And I know some of these books I'm definitely going to get. I'm going to get the Nonviolent Communication for sure. And I have a couple people that I can think of buying the other ones. I love gifting books, which, sometimes people are like, why do you think I need this book? But I'm like, but it will help. But it could help you.
Yes. But okay, there's one thing in the Hoffman process.
Okay.
They say never try to fix somebody else. And I did try, and it backfired on me. And now our relationship is very different, and it makes me sad. And because it's my sister. But so
I'm going to take your advice. I won't be gifting the books.
I mean, tell people about them if they want to read them. Great. But, somebody personally you're involved with.
Right.
Do yourself a favor and don't.
Yeah, I learned that lesson a long time ago when I tried telling one of my best friends of over 30 years that her husband was kind of abusive, and anyways, we stopped talking for like 6 or 8 months, and now we are talking, and now she is being very vocal about it, but she was not wanting to face it back then. And you never want anybody to get in your marriage, and I wasn't married at that point, so I, according to her, didn't have any grounds to talk about someone's marriage because I didn't have marriage, just like I have no grounds to talk about children.
I'm with you, sister. I have stepkids. I have 2 stepdaughters, 3 grandkids, and now 3 great granddaughters, and it's wonderful. But I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, well, that negates all the people who have adopted children.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. I mean, I still have common sense.
Right.
I may not have the feels that giving birth to someone or raising them. But so
you totally get it.
I hear you.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to definitely put the books in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, I don't know.
No.
Was there?
No, I'm just asking. Anyways, well,
I know I'm going to remember something later.
Yes.
And think, ooh.
Yes. Well, Wendy is absolutely beautiful inside and out, and she has a skincare and hair care business. So
I do.
Yeah. So share that really quickly.
I'm an executive consultant for Rodan and Fields skincare, and now we have hair care that is fantastic. So if anybody needs anything,
we'll drop the link.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
so,
awesome. Well, thank you, Wendy, for joining me. Thank you all for listening today, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for stroking it with me this morning. Make sure to check out my Tuesdays, which are the quickies. They're less than 20 minutes and offer great, valuable information.
For additional tips and tools and great resources, make sure to follow the Stroke It Guide on Facebook and Instagram. Have a great day stroking it.